Several years ago, I read an article. This should tell you how long ago I read this article. It was in Life magazine that I read this particular article. And in this article, they interviewed a bunch of second and third graders, and they asked them what love was. And so one little girl said, "Love is when my father rubs my mother's feet after she gets done working at the hospital as a nurse, because her feet really hurt. And my father rubs them even though they really, really smell." And a little boy said, "Love is when you give someone your last French fry, even though you want it yourself." And another little girl said, "Love is when my grandpa paints my grandma's toenails because she's too old and can't bend over anymore." The reality is we are here because we ourselves have experienced the greatest love possible. The unconditional love of God. The glory of the cross. And in that experience, everything about us has forever changed. And as we gather on this Laetare Sunday, halfway through our Lenten journey, we are called to rejoice, right? To claim for ourselves the joy that comes from our encounter of the glory of the cross. And I tell you, joy is discovered in faith at the intersection of love, faith, and hope. Joy is discovered and experienced at the intersection of love, faith, and hope. And we have experienced the ultimate love, right? That willing sacrifice of the cross. And when we look at the cross, what do we see in that great act of sacrificial love? In the cross, we see absolutely everything. For the cross speaks of cruelty, the cruelty of hatred. And the cross speaks to us of deep institutional injustice. And the cross speaks to us of the agony of the denial of friends, a denial that they ever even knew you. And the cross speaks of the agony of betrayal. And the cross speaks to us of violence, horrific violence. And in the cross, we see physical suffering, excruciating pain, an instrument of torture that was meant to violate the human being in the worst way possible. In the cross, we experience and see a total abandonment, a spiritual agony, a physical agony. And in the cross, we see the ultimate in human humiliation, spit upon, cursed, degraded, naked upon the cross. This is the act of unconditional love, the gift that God has bestowed upon us of taking upon this suffering of the human to redeem through the redeeming grace of the cross. And in love, this is bestowed upon us. And it is this experience of unconditional love in the glory of the cross that we encounter God. God breaking into our life, freely choosing to offer that life so that we might know the redeeming grace of salvation. And then born of that love is the gift of faith, the gift bestowed upon those children of God who open ourselves to the reality of the cross. And today we hear proclaimed perhaps the most well-known verse in the Bible, right? John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, not to condemn, And in that belief, in that faith, we come to know redeeming grace. At the same time, we see God then who accompanies us in and through all the most difficult challenges that we could ever possibly face in this world. In taking upon himself all of human suffering, he destroys the power of evil, the bonds of darkness, and sets us free. And so born of that love is a faith that leads us to the grace, the redeeming grace of God. God who accompanies us. God who never abandons us. God who is in and through and with us through every possible darkness we could face along the way. And then from that love and faith comes the essential hope of the human being, that we are loved, that we will never be abandoned, that we have experienced not only love, but unconditional love and redeeming grace. And then ultimately, we have experienced and come to experience salvation. And the word salvation itself simply means healing, a total and complete healing that we're offered, a oneness that ultimately we see God face to face and come to experience the fullness of life in his kingdom as it was meant to be. At the intersection of love, faith, and hope, we come to know gospel joy. And we rejoice, right? We rejoice over that grace and that power that is always with us, that encompassing unconditional love that always surrounds us. We rejoice in a love so profound that God sent his only Son not to condemn, but to save. We rejoice in the greatest love story ever told.